Maya Osei had a rule about mornings. Before anyone could need something from her, before the emails arrived and the phone started its soft, relentless buzzing, she walked the courtyard behind Meridian Tower alone. 20 minutes, no calls. Just the sound of water moving through the garden beds and the city waking up 1 block north of where she stood. She had built this company from 11 people in a rented office above a dry cleaner into something with 400 employees and a building with its own name. She had done it by being the first one in every room and the last one to leave. The mornings were the only hour that still belonged to her. On the 3rd Tuesday of September, she rounded the tall hedge at the back of the courtyard and found a man crouching near the base of the flower beds, his hands buried in a tangle of black irrigation tubing. He had a gray t-shirt, muddy knees, and a focused silence around him that suggested he had been there for a while and planned to stay a while longer. Maya did not break her stride. "The third quarter numbers came back this morning," she said, in the direction of the back of his head. 14% below forecast, which means my board meeting on Friday is going to be exactly as enjoyable as I expected, which is not at all. The man said nothing. He pulled a small tool from his belt and pressed it into the connector joint on the tubing. Maya walked slowly past him, hands wrapped around her coffee cup, eyes on the far hedge. "My VP of operations wants to delay the product rollout. My head of finance wants to cut the design budget. My head of design wants to cut the finance team." She paused. "Nobody agrees on anything except that someone else is the problem." The man made a small adjustment to the timer panel on the side of the garden bed wall. A soft click, then the hiss of water moving correctly through the line for the first time that morning. "Good," she said. "Not about the water." She finished her circuit of the courtyard, went back inside, and did not think about him again. His name was Daniel Reyes. He had driven from his house in Silver Spring that morning at 5:45, dropped his daughter Sophia at his sister's apartment, and arrived at Meridian Tower at 6:30 with a coffee thermos and a site plan folded into the back pocket of his work pants. The irrigation timer had been broken since the previous week. His team had flagged it. He had come early to fix it himself because he liked fixing things in the quiet before the day got loud. He was a landscape architect. His company, Reyes Plus Partners, had been contracted 6 weeks ago to redesign the Meridian Tower campus, the courtyard, the rooftop garden, 3 ground-level pocket parks along the building's perimeter. It was the largest project his firm had taken on. He had spent 4 months putting together the proposal. He crouched by the timer and listened to the woman with the coffee cup talk about her board meeting, her VP, her head of finance, her head of design. He did not interrupt. He had learned, in the 2 years since his wife died, that people sometimes needed to say things out loud without anyone responding. That it was a different kind of quiet than silence, more like water finding its level. He fixed the timer. He drove back to his office. He had a presentation at 10. At 10 o'clock, Maya's assistant led a man into the 34th floor conference room and said, "Daniel Reyes, Reyes and Partners." Maya was standing at the window with her back to the door. She turned. He was wearing a clean white shirt now. He had a portfolio under his arm and a thermos, the same one, she would later think, in his left hand. He looked at her with the calm, specific attention of someone who was not surprised to be there. She recognized him in the way you recognize a face from a photograph you saw once, and then forgot. Something about the set of his shoulders, the way he stood without performing anything. "I fixed the timer," he said, "in case you were wondering." He did not smile. He did not smile. He set his portfolio on the conference table and opened it. Maya did not move for 4 seconds. 4 seconds is not a long time in most situations. In Maya Osei's conference room, on a Tuesday morning, with 14% missing from her quarterly forecast, it was the longest 4 seconds she had experienced in recent memory. She sat down. "Show me what you have," she said. He showed her. The campus redesign was not what she expected. It was not prettier hedges and new pavers. It was a rethinking of how people moved through the building, where they stopped, where they gathered, where the sight lines opened up and where they closed. He had spent 6 weeks walking the campus at different hours of the day, watching where the Meridian employees went on their breaks and where they avoided. He had drawn conclusions about the building that her own management team had never put into words. "Your people don't talk to each other," he said, pointing to a map of foot traffic patterns he had tracked over 3 weeks. "Not because they don't want to, because the building doesn't give them anywhere good to be." She looked at the map. She looked at the renderings. She looked at the small, precise handwriting in the margins of his site plan, where he had noted things like West Courtyard, no shade after 11 a.m., nobody stays, and roof stairwell, avoided entirely, unclear why. Investigate. "You investigated the stairwell," she said. "The door is heavy," he said. "Makes a sound like something breaking when it closes. Nobody wants to be the person who made that sound in a quiet building." She was quiet for a moment. "How much of this can you complete before the end of the fiscal year?" "Depends on what you cut." "My board wants to cut the whole project." He nodded as if this was information and not a problem. "Then we prioritize. What matters most to you?" Nobody had asked her that in a long time. She noticed it the way you notice a draft. Not dramatically, just a shift in the air. "The courtyard," she said, "and the roof." "Those are the right two," he said. The board meeting on Friday was not, in fact, as terrible as she expected. It was worse. 2 of her 5 board members wanted the campus project canceled entirely. 1 wanted her to delay it by 18 months. The other 2 were quiet, in the way that people are quiet when they are deciding which side to stand on. Not as a landscaping project. She had learned better than that in 11 years of board meetings. She presented it as a retention strategy, as a recruitment tool, as a structural response to the fact that her attrition rate had risen 6% in the last year, and her HR team had flagged workplace environment in 30% of exit interviews. She had pulled those numbers the night before. She had not pulled them because anyone told her to. She had pulled them because a man with muddy knees had looked at her building differently than anyone else had, and she had started to wonder what else she had been looking at without actually seeing. The board approved a reduced version of the project, the courtyard and the roof. The rest would be reviewed in the spring. It was not a victory. It was a foothold. She would take it. Through October and into November, Daniel was at the building 3 or 4 days a week. He was quiet in a way that was not unfriendly. He answered questions directly. He made decisions without a lot of discussion. When something wasn't working, a planting placement, a site angle, a material that looked different in actual light than it had in the sample, he said so plainly, and proposed something else. He did not waste time being upset about it. His daughter Sophia was 8. She came to the building twice, once on a school holiday, once on a Saturday when his usual babysitter canceled. She wore a yellow jacket and followed her father around the site with a clipboard that held a blank sheet of paper and a green marker, and she made notes that no one could read except her. On the Saturday, Maya came in to catch up on work. She was not expecting to find Sophia sitting on the floor of the lobby, drawing what appeared to be a very detailed map of the building's ground floor, including a section she had labeled, in green marker, the place with the good smell, which turned out to be the small coffee station near the south entrance. "Your map is missing the courtyard," Maya said. "Dad's still making it," Sophia said, without looking up. "I don't draw things that aren't done yet." Maya considered this. "That's a very sensible policy." "I know," Sophia said. On a Thursday in late October, Daniel came back to the building, not as a vendor with an appointment, but because he had been thinking. His thinking had started 3 weeks earlier, when he was standing on the roof at 4 in the afternoon, watching the light change across the city. He had noticed, then, that every time he was on the roof, he could hear the ventilation system from the floor below. Not loud, just present. A low, constant sound that you stopped noticing after a few minutes, the way you stop noticing traffic or the hum of a refrigerator. He thought about Maya talking into the back of his head in the courtyard. He thought about the foot traffic maps. He thought about the exit interview statistics she had mentioned, almost in passing, during one of their project meetings. He thought about the heavy stairwell door. He put together 20 minutes of observations on a single sheet of paper. He did not make it a presentation. He did not add graphs or cover pages, or a title that used the word synergy. He folded the paper in half and brought it to her office on a Thursday morning and asked her assistant if she had 7 minutes. She had the assistant put him in the small meeting room next to her office, rather than the big conference room. She came in with her coffee. She unfolded the paper. She read it standing up. He had written down everything the building was doing to her people that nobody had named yet. The ventilation noise that made the fourth floor feel anxious in a way no one could explain. The cafe layout that forced people to queue in a line facing a wall, so they stood alone for 4 minutes every morning, instead of facing each other. The meeting rooms, with no windows, that made every difficult conversation feel more difficult, because there was nowhere to look except at the problem. "You've been here 6 weeks, she said. 7, he said. "You noticed all of this in 7 weeks. "I notice things when I'm in spaces," he said. "It's the job." She set the paper down. She looked at him. There is a particular way that people look at each other when they are deciding something that has nothing to do with the meeting they are in. It lasts about 2 seconds. Neither person names it. Both people register it. "I'll get the full campus approved," she said. "Give me until February." He nodded. "February works." The roof garden opened in December. It was not a grand opening. There was no ceremony, no announcement, no catered lunch or ribbon. One morning the elevator worked, and the roof was finished, and people started going up there on their breaks. Within a week, it was the most used space in the building. It was full of plants that bloomed even in winter, deep greens, and the quiet whites of things that didn't need warmth to stay alive. Daniel had chosen them deliberately. He wanted the garden to be something in December, when the rest of the city went gray, and the days got short, and people needed, more than at any other time of year, somewhere alive to stand. Sophia came to see it on the day it opened, in her yellow jacket. She stood at the edge of the garden near the low wooden railing, and looked out at the city, and then she turned around and looked at what her father had made, and she said, without directing it at anyone in particular, "My dad cries when things are beautiful." Daniel said, "Sophia." "It's true," she said. He did not deny it. Maya was standing 6 feet away. She had heard it. She looked at the garden, really looked at it, the way she had been learning to look at things. She had been walking past too quickly for too long. She did not say anything. She took out her phone and typed a note to herself. 2 words. She put the phone back in her pocket and did not show it to anyone. Array. The irrigation timer still fired every morning at 6:47. Maya knew this because she had started arriving at the courtyard 2 minutes early. Not to walk, not to think about the board, or the quarterly numbers, or the product rollout, or the 18 things waiting for her on the 34th floor. She came and stood near the garden bed at the south end of the courtyard, the one Daniel had replanted in October, with something low and dark green that she still didn't know the name of, and she waited for the water. When it came quietly, a soft pressure through the line, and then the hiss, and then the smell of wet soil in cold air, which is one of the few smells in the world that makes the future feel less urgent than the present. Daniel had told her, when they were finalizing the planting plan, that the thing most people got wrong about gardens was that they thought they were building something to look at. "You're building something to be inside of," he had said. "That's different. It changes what you plant and where you put it, and how you think about the edges." She had written that down too. She stood in the courtyard on a Wednesday morning in December, 2 minutes before 6:47, and she thought about edges, about what it meant to build something you were meant to be inside of, about the kind of attention it required to notice what a space was doing to the people living in it. The timer clicked. The water moved through the line. She stood there and let it.